Some more NASCAR silly season dominoes have fallen here in the past few days. Let's catch up with that news and talk about and speculate about some other possible upcoming announcements. We've got a lot to talk about in today's episode. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. Even though it may be the off season, there is no shortage of topics to discuss on this show. We were going to be talking about a lot of NASCAR silly season news and notes, a few things to touch on in this episode. I know right now, as I'm filming this, as I'm editing it, NASCAR Cup drivers are out doing burnouts in Nashville. The banquet, the awards banquet is tomorrow night, so there maybe will be some news that comes out of that. There are some topics that came out today that I might make a video on shortly that were very interesting, but this episode I'm mainly going to focus on some silly season news from the last few days. Let's catch up on those topics. But before I do that, let's start with a next-gen car announcement. So yesterday it was announced that Joey Logano is going to test the next-gen car at Phoenix ISM Raceway next week. Nothing much else to talk about. Unclear whether or not media is going to be able to go to this. You know, when Austin Dillon tested the car last month or 2 months ago, whatever it was at Richmond, it was closed off to media. The only real look in that we got as fans was when Austin Dillon talked about it on his Instagram story. So it's unclear if with this test media will have more access, if there will be more answers to certain questions or anything. Steve Phelps said at Homestead earlier last month that the next-gen car is going to likely still be delivered to race teams by July, which will give them, a half year, 6-7 months to prepare for the 2021 season. So it sounds like the car is on schedule. I've heard that they're testing at Richmond, which is a 3/4 mile. Now they're testing at Phoenix, which is a 1 mile track. They're still trying to figure out their short track program. They're definitely focusing on that right now. They haven't put the cars in the wind tunnel yet to really fine-tune the intermediate program yet for the next-gen car, but I do like that they're starting with the short tracks, because I think short tracks are kind of where this current package falls flat, and short tracks are, I think, what I think a lot of NASCAR fans want to see more of going forward. So it's nice to see NASCAR kind of prioritizing the shorter tracks, get those figured out, and then move up to the bigger and faster racetracks. But that's all we really know. We'll see if anything else comes out of this test, but next week, Joey Logano will be the next driver to test the next-gen prototype. Now let's talk about silly season stuff. The top story yesterday, LaJoie announced his 2020 plans. He will be staying with Go Fast Racing. He'll be in the 32. He signed a 1-year extension, a 1-year deal with that team. He'll still be in that race car. A lot of his partners are coming back next year. He announced this on his Sunday Money MRM podcast, and he gave some kind of interesting details and extra behind-the-scenes information about this deal. I'm excited for LaJoie. I've gotten to know LaJoie, actually. He's like the one NASCAR Cup driver that I actually know, I feel like. He kind of hinted this on his podcast. I saw Adam Stern tweeted something about this as well. It sounds like he had kind of a choice between Go Fast Racing and Front Row Motorsports, and LaJoie obviously opted to stay with Go Fast. It's a team he has some consistency with. He was there this last year, raced a full-time season for them. And I think this is a really smart move from LaJoie. There are a lot of drivers in contract years here in 2020. When we look at 2021, the start of the next generation of NASCAR, there are really only a few drivers that I think know for sure where they're going to be that year. We have the potential of 15, 20, 25 cars being up in the air, being open to changes at the end of 2020. And LaJoie, I think by staying with Go Fast, who is getting an increased technical alliance with Stewart Haas Racing next year, staying in that race car, possibly taking some steps forward this year in that race car, I think sets him up really nicely to possibly be in the running for something like the 48 car, or a Chip Ganassi car perhaps, or an SHR car maybe even. I mentioned this on my episode I think last week, talking about Daniel Suarez, but I was afraid if Daniel Suarez ends up going with Front Row Motorsports, which that still is a possibility, I guess, we kind of just eventually forget about Suarez, because Front Row Motorsport is a team that's not really going anywhere right now. They're not really fading away, but they're definitely not building towards something great. They're just kind of there. Go Fast Racing, given their now increased technical support with Stewart Haas next year, LaJoie said on his podcast that the last year they were racing with like 4-year-old Roush Fenway and front row cars. This next year, for 2020, they're going to be racing like 1-2-year-old Stewart Haas cars. It's going to be similar to what Levine Family Racing has had with Gibbs this year, where they have kind of a small alliance, but it's helped that Levine car quite a bit. They finished second at Bristol, for Pete's sake. The 32 Go Fast is going to be very similar, I think, to that 95, the way it was this year. So this is a great step forward for LaJoie. That's going to be a car that isn't going to really be a playoff contender probably, but they'll run top 20 sometimes. They might sneak in and grab a top 10 here and there. I'm excited for LaJoie and that team. I hope they take a step forward next year. And I hope LaJoie positions himself nicely, because there are, like I said, there are going to be a lot of drivers gunning for new spots in 2021. As we've seen, contracts don't mean a whole lot. You can be bought out pretty quick. You can be practically traded pretty quick in the Cup Series these days. So most guys are racing for their next contracts here in 2020. So LaJoie is going to be positioning himself up nicely to hopefully get a solid ride after this year. But But anyway, with that being said, let's talk about some more Stewart Haas stuff, because Stewart Haas Racing, the main Stewart Haas Racing, also made some announcements earlier this week. They revealed their crew chief lineups. Kevin Harvick and Rodney Childers will be together once again, but Eric Almirola and Clint Bowyer are trading crew chiefs. Johnny Klausmeier will be with Bowyer. Mike Bugaravich will be with Eric Almirola next year, and then Cole Custer is going to be bringing Mike Shiplett up to the Cup Series with him. Shiplett has been with Custer down in Xfinity this last year, so that's their lineup. Billy Scott, who was with Daniel Suarez this past year, is apparently no longer with Stewart Haas Racing. There's reports that maybe he could go over to Go Fast, because Go Fast Racing, Corey LaJoie's team, does not have a crew chief lined up or has not announced a crew chief yet, so perhaps they'll be getting someone from the SHR system, but those are the 4 crew chiefs that Stewart Haas is going with. Interesting that they just decided to switch Almirola's and Boyer's crew chief to get around. That seems interesting to me. I'm not sure what that necessarily accomplishes, but it mixes it up, changes things a little bit. JTG Doherty Racing also made a big announcement earlier this week. They announced their crew chief and driver lineup specifically. We already knew Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is going to be on that race team in place of Chris Buescher, who's going over to Roush, but now it turns out that Ricky Stenhouse will actually be in the 47 next year. They're moving Ryan Preece from the 47 to the 37, and they've already announced their crew chiefs now. Trent Owens will still be on the 37. He was Chris Buescher's crew chief last year. He will now be Ryan Preece's crew chief on the 37. Meanwhile, Brian Pattie is coming over to the organization. He's worked with Stenhouse for several years. He will be Ricky Stenhouse, his crew chief, on the 47 car. Some interesting changes here. I, for one, am kind of annoyed that they're moving Ryan Preece from the 47 to the 37. I don't understand these changes from a marketing or from a branding perspective, because you look at throughout NASCAR history, drivers become iconic, become synonymous with their numbers, with paint schemes, with that type of stuff. Jeff Gordon in the 24, Dale Earnhardt in the 3, Petty 43, Kyle Busch in the 18 kind of today. And for the fact that Ryan Preece, why would you, he's just ran his rookie year in the 47. Everyone just went out and bought 47 stuff. Why would you move him to the 37? You're just going to annoy those fans. I don't think that many of them are going to buy 37 stuff. You still have a bunch of unsold 47 merchandise that you can't sell now. I don't understand why they bother changing it. Why not just slap a different sticker on the side of it? Why not just do whatever else you got to do? Why do you have to change his number? Anyway, they did that. Brian Pattie over there to the 47 with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. They've had some success together. They've won a couple of races at Roush together. Brian Pattie, we forget about Brian Pattie, but he did have a great year in 2012 with Clint Bowyer when they almost won the championship that year when they both were with Michael Waltrip Racing. So Brian Pattie, I'm convinced, is a decent crew chief, but I don't know, maybe his best years are behind, maybe he hasn't figured out these new cars as well. Either way, it sounds to me like maybe JTG Doherty is looking at focusing a lot of their attention on Ryan Preece. I think this last year, Chris Buescher clearly outran Preece many weeks, and so they're teaming up Preece now with Trent Owens, crew chief for Buescher last year. Like, they think Trent Owens was maybe the genius behind that. So I think it shows signs to me that they're really focusing a lot of their energy on Preece, and they kind of want Stenhouse in there to just kind of offer in whatever feedback he possibly can. But we'll see what happens for JTG next year. We'll see if Stenhouse, if that really turns out to be that could end up being a really good partnership. And the fact that they're bringing someone over that Stenhouse is familiar with, that could be helpful to him as well, helpful to his transition, because Stenhouse really doesn't know any other team besides Roush. He's been with Roush pretty much his entire NASCAR career. I mean, going even back to his Xfinity days and stuff like that. Anyway, there's the news on that side of things. Let's talk about one other kind of, it's not news, but it is speculation. It's a rumor that was reported by Adam Stern. Front Row Motorsports, now that Corey LaJoie is locked up with Go Fast, their driver lineup for 2020 is maybe starting to take shape as well. They haven't signed anyone yet, but speculation suggests that John Hunter Nemechek and Michael McDowell will be their 2 drivers next year. They will be cutting back down to a 2-car team instead of the 3-car team. They brought that 3rd car in for a couple of years here. They're cutting back down to a 2-car team from the sounds of it. Sounds like Michael McDowell is going to sign a new contract, and with Matt Tiff's health issues, David Reagan retiring, sounds like Front Row Motorsports is going to go with John Hunter Nemechek possibly in their 2nd car. If that's the case, we will have 4 pretty high-profile rookies in the Cup Series next year with Nemechek, and then obviously the big 3 of Bell, Custer, and Reddick. I'm not really against this move at all. Michael McDowell's kind of just there. He's just going to do his normal thing. He's not going to get anyone super excited, but he's solid. He has consistency with that team. Fine. John Hunter Nemechek actually ran pretty well the 3 final races this year when he filled in for Matt Tiff, so I don't hate the move, putting John Hunter Nemechek in that car. The interesting thing about this, though, is if Front Row Motorsports does end up signing those 2 drivers, and with Go Fast now it's locked in with LaJoie, and Stewart Haas has filled all their seats, where does Daniel Suarez end up? I mean, at this point, it sounds like it's Xfinity is his only option. And I know there's been rumors that he could go down and race for RCR in the Xfinity Series, but we haven't heard anything more about that. Corey LaJoie also mentioned on his podcast, I really love Corey LaJoie's Sunday Money podcast. It's a great podcast. He mentioned in his podcast that he talked to Suarez the other day, and Suarez apparently doesn't have a deal. Like, Suarez is genuinely not sure what he's doing next year, and we're in December. I mean, I know last year or this year, he didn't sign his deal with SHR until January. He waited till the last possible minute to sign a deal for that 41 car. Is he going to have to do the same thing again this year? You can't keep doing that. You can't keep backing yourself into that wall every single year where you're not under contract until a week before Daytona. You got to sort these things out ahead of time, man. And the fact that Suarez here in December does not sound confident about what he's doing next year, man, really raises some questions. Really, really does. Anyway, we'll wait and see on that one. We'll wait and see if Front Row Motorsports actually does sign McDowell and John Hunter Nemechek. That just sounds like that's what's most likely at this point. Last bit of silly season news. I've talked about Cup Series stuff. Let's talk about Xfinity stuff. Speaking of that RCR Xfinity program, they announced their two drivers at least, that will be sharing duties in the 21 car next year for that team. Mayon Snyder, who we haven't heard that name that much in recent months, he will be racing a few select races in that 21 Xfinity car. Also, Anthony Alfredo, who we've seen in the Truck Series this last year with DGR Crossley in some races, they will both be splitting time in the 21 car. That's pretty exciting. Two very young drivers. I'm really excited to see what Anthony Alfredo does. Snyder made a couple starts for ThorSport this year in the Truck Series and had a couple top 10s, so I'm convinced in decent equipment in the Xfinity Series, maybe he can take some steps forward. He's just doing part-time though, so we'll see what happens there. Anthony Alfredo, also really excited to see what he does next year. Even though it's part-time, still getting yourself in solid equipment for a significant amount of races. Really a chance to put your name out there and really get people excited for your future career. So I'm looking forward to seeing what those two guys do. But there you have it. Those are all the big updates. NASCAR silly season stuff. There's still some dominoes that have not yet fallen. I know I keep saying that, and it just feels like silly season is never going to... It feels like the whole season is just silly. I hinted at it a second ago, but I might have to do a full video sometime soon where I try to look ahead a year in advance and try to predict what's going to happen in 2021, because there are a lot of drivers in contract years. There are a lot of drivers and a lot of teams that are kind of questioning where they're at right now. And I just think we could see, I know we're going to see a different Cup Series in 2021 and beyond anyways, different schedule, different car, yada, yada, yada. But we're going to see a lot of new drivers and a lot of drivers just in different locations next year. We might see Brad Keselowski suddenly in RCR equipment. That's a terrible prediction. That's definitely not going to happen. But that's what I'm saying. We could see something crazy like that we didn't see coming. We didn't see Buescher and Stenhouse trading. Nobody saw that one coming. Nobody predicted that. With Johnson retiring, there's a lot of rumors and some stories came out today about the favorites for the 48 car. There's a lot to talk about, but we're going to get to that sometime soon. We've got many months before the 2021 season even starts to cross our minds. But there's a lot that's going to possibly change. Anyway, thank you guys for watching this episode. I really appreciate it. Remember to follow me on Twitter. Remember to follow me on Instagram. Subscribe if you're new. And thank you, of course, to my Patreon supporters. Mike Waffles, Michael Harrison, at Gio as the Stars, Cameron, James, John Koblenz, Jason R., Long, Wesley Donaldson, Isaac Denson, Mika Suzuki, iFantasyRace.com, TheRacingInsiders.com, Matthew Koulopoulos, Pepe Lucius, Jeremy Conkling, Emilio Garcia, Joey DiMancino, Sky Racing Forum, Bryce Schumacher, Bryce Starcher, Scott McNew, Colton Austin, Bradley Pelletier, and these incredible Patreon supporters here. This is an incredible group of people. Thank you guys for your continued support of me, continued support of the show. I could not do this each week without you guys. If you missed it yesterday, I think I uploaded a video, my top 10 favorite paint schemes from this last NASCAR Cup Series season. Here in the next day or two, I should have my top 10 least favorite paint schemes. That'll be a video up as well, so get excited for that. I got some more news, some more things to talk about, of course, next week. The ball just continues to roll, y'all. This offseason is going to be crazy. Banquet is tomorrow night. I'm not sure if it's on TV. It might be. I have no idea. Either way, I'm sure there'll be some funny stories or news to come out of that as well. Stay tuned. Keep it tuned in right here because we will cover all of it, any of it, every single second of it, all that stuff. We're going to talk about everything throughout this offseason. I need content. It's the offseason. I need stuff to talk about, and I have a feeling we're going to have no shortage of topics. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you guys again very, very soon. Have a good rest of your night.